my name's Jodie Lopez. I'm part of the United Learning EdTech team, and we're going to look today at maths curriculum prioritisation. This is a mixed slide deck with some slides from Jo Jackson Taylor of Avonwood Primary School. So thank you, Jo, for sharing your slides and resources, and hopefully I'll do those justice in amongst my own slides here. So to take a look at the session, we've got our general overview here. And from that, if we look at the agenda, we're going to be looking at the role of diagnostic assessment. We're going to look at the ready to progress strands, the RTP strands. We're going to look at how the RTP strands can inform curriculum prioritisation. We're going to look at how to make use of the NCTM materials available, as they're all free online. We're going to look at some digital platforms that can support curriculum prioritisation in maths and the use of RTP digital quizzes in school. So to get us started, we're going to have a look first of all at the role of diagnostic assessment. So we know that delivering the mathematics curriculum has never been so vital. And we know that there's research curated by the EEF, the Education Endowment Foundation, that shows that pupils are on average about 3 months in progress deficit in maths due to the disruptions of the pandemic. And of course we know that those gaps are quite varied from child to child, depending on their experiences at home and their resources and what happened for them during those lockdowns that we had. So there are very different scenarios for different children, and the gaps aren't always in the same places, which makes it even harder to try and make sure that everyone gets back up to speed and moves forward, able to pass their SATs at the end of year 2 and year 6, and also to just be ready to move on for the next year of the curriculum. So we have the opportunity now to make a huge difference to a huge number of children, if only we can ensure that we are giving them exactly what they need, which, as I said, might be very, very much individual from child to child, which makes it even trickier. Summative assessments, if you might be doing summative assessments at the end of the year, you might be doing summative assessments at the end of the term, but they're unlikely to provide granular detail needed to identify the most significant areas to attend to. And vitally, summative assessments are not easy to feed straight into your teaching and learning, just purely because they take up a lot of the areas at the end of the term, and then you're kind of planning a term ahead, and then by the time you get to the next unit of the same topic, then it might have changed again for individual children anyway. So diagnostic formative assessment can steer the consolidation of fundamental prior knowledge through eliciting the specific domains and skills that are not yet secure. And this is a case study from Jo Jackson Taylor's school, Avonwood Primary, and this was around year 3 being able to unitise in tens. So they found that year 3 children might have seen secure in place value knowledge on the surface, but then when exploring the ready to progress unit strand 3NPV1, they revealed that identifying the quantity of tens in 3-digit numbers was not as yet secure for many of the children. So that's obviously a good example there of where it might look like children are ready, they might have a kind of a basic understanding of something, or it might look like they are, but when it comes to applying and actually kind of manipulating numbers, it starts to unravel for some children and actually shows up that they're not as secure as we might have thought they were when they're applying this outside of the lesson where it's specifically taught. So what are the ready to progress strands? If you haven't been using these yet, the ready to progress criteria has been selected in order to develop pupils' mastery of the primary maths curriculum. And if all the criteria are taught and met, pupils will be able to more easily access many of the elements of the curriculum that are not covered according to the guidance from Third Space Learning. Now there's a link here which you'll be able to link through when you get the slides from this. You'll be able to click on that link and have a look at that blog, and that's a really interesting blog from Third Space Learning, because what they've done is they've analysed and compared the difference between the main maths national curriculum and the RTP strands, and they've basically done a lot of the hard work for you in picking out where the differences lay. So for example, there are some areas of the curriculum that just aren't covered at all by the RTP strands, so obviously it's still necessary to try and bring those in, although the idea, particularly in years that aren't SATs years, it'll hopefully have time to kind of get them caught up on the RTP basics and then move on to some of that curriculum that's not fully included, but it is important to know what is missing. And they also look there at some of the objectives from the RTP strands that are maybe slightly out of the year group of what they normally are in the maths curriculum. So that's a really interesting blog to read through, and I recommend spending a few minutes to read that if you can. So the 79 criteria are split across the year groups into following core topics. So you've got 6 topics: number and place value, number facts, addition and subtraction, multiplication and division, fractions and geometry. And there's another link here, which when you get to the slides from this, you can click on there, and all the RTP exemplification can be found on the NCTM website. And then we've got a quote here from Debbie Morgan saying, "Don't try to teach everything, build confidence and firm foundations for the future." And sometimes it feels hard to do that because there's so much to fit in, and we're trying to get everything done in a very small time scale, and often with a lot of gaps to fill. So it's hard to sometimes stop and just stick with something for a while if we feel that they're not ready to move on. But it is important to find ways to do that, as well as moving everyone through the curriculum content. So if you haven't seen the strands yourself yet, or you haven't been on the NCTM website to find them, then this picture on the right might look a bit like a Dulux paint colour chart to you. But this is essentially year groups 1 to 6 in the rows, and then the different colours relate to those 6 different areas of the curriculum. And again, we've got a link here to the resource that provides the sequencing of that maths curriculum on the NCTM website. So you can have a look at there. There's lots of materials available. We'll have a very quick look at that in this session, but there are loads of materials there to have a look at in your own time and to pull from and use. There's PowerPoints for every objective and lesson guidance and all of the curriculum mapping for each year group, which is what makes up this colour chart on the right hand side for each year. So there's curriculum sequencing, they've got downloadable PowerPoint and classroom slides, as well as comprehensive links to the pages in the DFE Primary Mathematics Guidance. So everything is available for you, and it's all available for free. So how can the RTP strands inform curriculum prioritisation? Well, one of the kind of major foundations of Rosenshine's work is around checking for understanding and making sure that we know that although we might have told the student something and we've taught the student something, have they received that message? Are they retaining that learning, and are they able to share it again and apply that? So there's this quote here from Rosenshine: "If we are going to be sure all students have formed secure understanding, teachers should not assume that knowledge aired and shared in the public space of the classroom has been absorbed and learned by any individual." So again, it's coming down to trying to find out at an individual level as well as a class level whether they are secure and ready to move on to the next section or the next unit or the next topic, and thinking about those building blocks, which are what the RTP represents, the building blocks of mathematics, to make sure that they are secure to go on to learn any of the other areas. So looking at some of the resources from NCTM, there, as we said, there's a curriculum map and resources on their website, and for each of their curriculum maps you've got all the different units, and then if you go into each unit there's also classroom slides for each of the units for each area of the curriculum for each year group. And so those PowerPoint slides are really, really useful because they're ready-made, they're really interactive as well. A lot of them have interactive content where it goes through it for you, so you've just literally click next in the slides. It takes you through some maths problems that you can then work through in front of the children on the whiteboard, and they'll be working through with you, and it's got all of the lesson guidance that goes with that as well. And you might already be using some of this. But one of the things that I've done with these slides is to pull out some of the slides that are standalone. So this is one really easy example from year 1. Some of these slides, as I say, are really interactive and go through different question sequences within an animated slide. So not all of them work on their own. But where there are ones that do work on their own, what I like to do is pull those out and save them into a PowerPoint all together for the whole year. So you take each of the PowerPoint sections, take out any slides that work on their own and put them into a separate PowerPoint of just all these individual slides. And then what I like to do is use these as starters in my maths lessons. So I might not be teaching addition and subtraction or number bonds in this particular lesson, but as part of my starter, I'm going to bring up one of these slides and just ask them to do this question. So this is a very simple one from year 1. And then you've got your answer coming up there, because this is part of the interactivity of those slides. So it's all done for you, and you just have to copy those slides into a different presentation. And then there's some here from year 2 curriculum. And so, as I say, these might just be put up at the beginning of the lesson to start them off. So as they're getting settled straight away into this, you might use these as part of your early morning work or after register in the afternoon work, or any of those times that you just want to have a task on the board and for children to just kind of get on with it on their own. So all the slides that I'm pulling out are ones that I think the children can kind of just get on with if I just put the slide up. And so while I'm settling the class and finding pencils for whoever's lost one or anything like that, everyone else can be getting on with doing the slide. And this is just a way of pulling out sections, so that we can do repetition of some of these objectives, because all of these PowerPoints that are ready made are just going to save you a bit of work as well. But by pulling them out, although they're going to redo them when we get to that unit, it gives me a chance to pull these out separately and just see and kind of formatively assess how children are doing against these. So whether I'm kind of just having a walk round while they're doing this, asking children to kind of put their hands up and answer, or targeting questions at different children. But I'm using this as a way to, if I'm doing it as a starter or kind of early busy work, as a way to kind of do some pre-assessment ready before I'm about to teach a unit, so that I can figure out who is going to need the most support when we get to that unit, whether the whole class is going to need a lot of support, or actually if this is something the class is really secure on and most children can move on, and I can plan that unit to actually be a bit shorter than it's been recommended for. So if it's a 3-week unit and I've pulled some of these slides out beforehand and used them in starters, I might only need to do it as a 2-week unit when I get to it. And it's another way of spreading out the curriculum as well, by picking out the things that can work as starters without needing the full context of everything. You can just keep checking on those skills and making sure they can do things. So this is a kind of an informal way of checking around the class to see who can do things, and also a way of spreading that curriculum in a way that means that when you do get to a unit that needs a lot of work, you're pre-prepared, you know that there are a lot of gaps in the class by the time you get to this unit. And also, inversely, if you realise actually pretty much everyone's got it, you might then change the plan for the whole class, but have some individual work for maybe 6 children who do need a bit of extra work on this. They might go out with a teaching assistant, they might work with me at a different time, whatever it might be. So again, this is one from the year 6 unit, so spatial reasoning starter. So again, this is part of what's built into a whole lesson with the NCTM PowerPoint, but I've just pulled it out so that I can check on this and see what they already know before I'm going to get to this full unit, where they'll see this again, but then we're going to do lots of modelling and we're going to work around it. So I'll just kind of have an idea in advance of what they can do. And then if I wanted to, I can then edit this PowerPoint, obviously, and make the example slightly different, or pick a different image and do it in a slightly different way. But it's at least given me lots of good ideas for questioning and things for them to look at and things for us to consider, and for me to get a general idea of how my class are going to tackle a question like this before I launch into a unit where I've kind of pre-planned the next 3 weeks, when actually it might need longer, or it might need shorter, or I might need to switch things around. Again, this is another one from year 6. So this is one that just on its own, I can say, right, what's happening here? What do we think these other boxes are worth? And this one I've actually taken fully out of context. So there is actually a context in the lesson version of this where it talks about there being 4 cakes bought that cost 80p each. So, and then there's a different item bought. There's 3 of those. So then, therefore, because we know there's 4 lots of 80p already gone, how much is that second item each? How much are they each? So By taking the context away, I'm also expecting my year sixes to start thinking for themselves what those question marks there. Are they going to just straight away chuck RTP into all of them, assuming that's right without checking it or without thinking further? And that's going to give me some information straight away by taking the context away from some of these and taking them out of the actual lesson where they're supposed to kind of go through all these different questions. I'm giving an opportunity for them to kind of see how they manipulate number, to see how they understand and how they approach a problem solving thing like this. So it's all just constantly kind of little ways with, just 5 minutes of a lesson, just see how children tackle questions like this. And then I might make a few more examples from the same, so from this starting point, and from this slide I might just add a few different versions myself and see how they tackle each of them. So when you're making use of the NCTM resources, yes, you've got all the time scale there of which units are going to take how long, but if you've already started using them, you might have already found this, that you're getting halfway through a unit and finding out actually there are other gaps that need to be filled. So by pulling out some of those resources into your starters, you can have at least a pre-idea of how that section's going to go when you get to it, and that might help you when you're planning to make kind of a better use of that planning, to target specific children, to change the way that you're going to work it, or to either slim down or bulk up that unit and take a bit longer if you think they're going to need lots of other things as well. There's no point getting halfway through a certain unit and then finding out their place value understanding is not ready to tackle what's in the unit itself. So it's just a way of kind of pulling out those kind of base skills as well. So copy the slides that you can stand alone into one deck from all the different various PowerPoints, and have a year group one that you can just chuck one up when you've got a few minutes, as say in a starter, early morning work when they're coming in the morning, when you're doing the register in the afternoon, any time like that, where you can just have a quick test of what the children are going to do and how they're going to approach certain questions, taken out of the context of the lesson. Because that's another thing, if you're teaching a lesson on addition, then they kind of know that everything they see is going to be addition. So by taking some of these things out of context and doing it separately, you're not giving them the context to expect, and that can show you how they're going to approach this in more of a test-like scenario, i.e. you haven't got the context of the lesson around it. So use them for starters or early morning work, register work whenever you've got a few minutes, and then do some formative assessment around that to just figure out what prior learning they have, and then it helps you to adapt the unit accordingly. You might consider pre-teaching in advance then. So if most of the students are ready, but you see there's kind of 2 or 3 children that are really struggling with one of the particular starter activities you've put up as a pre-teach, that you might then think, right, these children, I'm going to spend some time with them, in some lesson time, or separately with a teaching assistant, or with me going out with them when I can, to really kind of get them ready so that they start on a bit more of a level playing field with everyone else when we get to a particular unit. And then for some objectives, use the slides regularly. So there are some things like multiplication, place value, partitioning, number bonds, that you're going to want to repeat regularly. So if you take these slides out, you might find that there are some units or some areas that actually you can cover the unit by taking all of them out into starters and regularly doing 5 minutes a day, for example. So taking out all the different short tasks or the short questions on place value and partitioning, by keep repeating them, and with the number bonds ones, and just constant repetition. By the time you get to the unit again, so you've taught the unit once, and then you keep repeating it regularly over a few weeks. By the time you get to the full unit again, you hopefully got them really solid and they can actually whiz through the next unit. So it's a way of kind of spreading out. So of course you're going to pre-teach, so you will have taught a unit on multiplication, for example, or place value, to make sure they are secure on the understanding behind that. But then you're going to constantly be checking for place value and number bonds, and those repetitive things that you want to make sure are really secure. Again, you can reuse the slides, you can make your own version, and you can pull out some from the next unit to kind of check in advance before you get there as well. And then one thing I also like to do is use low threshold, high ceiling tasks to assess their problem solving and application skills. So again, can they apply these things outside of, can they apply the logic, can they apply the number skills to problems that anyone can access, and then I can judge to see how they're approaching different problems. So the low threshold essentially means anyone can do it, a task that everyone can get on board with at some level. Without needing too much support. And then high ceiling being that they can then, if they are working at a higher level, they can then take that on to maybe do something that's above the expectation perhaps. So one of my favourite examples of this, which I use from year 2 upwards, and variations of it, is the pet shop puzzle. So this puzzle is essentially, it's an all possibilities puzzle. So the pet shop's got 7 pets to choose from. You can buy any 3 pets on each visit, i.e. a cat, a dog and a mouse. You cannot buy 2 of the same pet in one visit, so you can't get 2 cats and a dog. How many different ways can you buy 3 pets? And then you use whichever method you want to find out. And I always say to the class, they're not going to get any help. They're going to they'll have paper out. They can come and get more paper if they want to. If they find something's not working, they can chuck it in the bin. They can start again. And the idea is to get them to really think about the logic of the puzzle. And then and it's low threshold because all the children will be able to go, oh, I can have a cat and a horse and an elephant. And then, oh, I can have a horse, a fox and a dog. Oh, I can have an elephant, a dog and a mouse. So they'll all be able to do something. But hopefully what they'll start to figure out, and this is what you'll prompt during the lesson, is that they need to have some sort of efficient method. So after they've had a go and they've kind of scribbled some down, have a look round and see if you can pull out an example, or if not, explain that an efficient method would be some sort of way of kind of lining them up. So start with everything that goes with a cat first, for example. So cat, horse, elephant is my first one. Then cat, horse, fox, then cat, horse, dog, then cat, horse, mouse, and so on. And by doing that, you'll then start grouping them in a way that you can check that you have got all of them, because if they do them randomly, they're not going to be able to check they've got them all at the end. How can they be sure they got every single variation at the end if they didn't do some sort of method? So then you kind of prompt them to do a method. We're still without telling them exactly how to do it, but ask them to think about ways to make sure they checked it. And that how can they check at the end they've got them all if they're doing it randomly. And then you might have some children that figure out at some point that there is actually a mathematical way to do this, because once they've done a couple of sets, they might work out that actually in every set there are going to be 5 possibilities, because there will always be 2 repeats in each set, i.e. ones where you've got 2 of the same animal. So you might find a child who just works out that actually it's 7 times 5 is 35 is the answer. So there's 35 different ways of doing it. And so they might have written out 35 ways, they might have written out a load of ways, but they've got more than 35 or less than 35. Or they might have worked out that actually if you take out some of the options, then there's actually 35 ways. And I've just realised I've only got 6 animals on my example, so I do apologise. There should be 7 animals there. So if you're going to use this, I'll add, before I do the actual slides, I will add another one on here. There should be 7 animals. One's dropped off the edge. I don't know where it's gone. So I'll put that back on before I share the slides. But there should be 7 animals here. So yeah, so they should figure out that basically there's 7 lots of 5. And it works out at 35. So that's a good example of a low threshold but high ceiling problem. So your low threshold is just writing groups of 3 animals, and then your high ceiling is those who can figure out that actually there's a way to work this out quickly once we know that there's always going to be 2 repeats in each group. So that's an idea. Those are all ideas of formative assessment ways that you can kind of do informal little assessments around the classroom, pulling out some of those ideas from the units and seeing where children are at, and kind of using some of those materials, not just in the unit itself, but pulling them out and using them as starters and even plenaries or starter work in the morning in advance of those units, to help you to plan those units to make sure that you use the best use of your time. If your class are all brilliant at shape, and you figure that out from doing some starter activities, then you can slim down how much time you spend on shape. And if they're struggling with place value, it gives you more time to spend on place value. So it's just making sure that you spread out that time really well. So moving on to some of the slides from Jo Jackson Taylor now of Avonwood. So quizzing is a way that Avonwood have been really effectively using short quizzes to help them to understand and see where the children are at, and do some gap analysis to understand kind of where their gaps might be and identifying the areas of development. So they're very low stakes quizzes. And so they've created 5-question mini quizzes for each of the RTP strands. They are happy to share these. So if you contact myself or Gemma, then we have the quizzes that can be shared with you if you'd like to use these. Jo's very, very kindly offered to share those with people who are taking this session. So these quizzes are all based on each of the RTP strands, and a really quick little quiz to just see how they're doing. And again, it's a way of making sure, seeing what gaps there are, seeing where they're strongest, and then being able to target individual support and teaching and really plan around what those gaps are, who's strongest at what the whole class are particularly struggling on, and so on. They've also shared here an example of how they're planning out their long-term plan for maths and how they're covering those different weeks. So with the consolidation weeks and then going on to different units through the term. So again, I'm sure Jo would be happy to share a kind of a longer version of this if you would like to request one. But I think if you look at the RTP guidance on the NCTM website, it's very similar to how this is laid out as well. And then you've got a medium term example here as well, so breaking that down into your plans for each of those weeks. And obviously you're going to use that information that you're taken from your low stakes quizzing and also from the formative assessment of kind of informal assessments as well that you'll do in the classroom using any of those starters and so on. And then using Microsoft Forms can be a really good way to create your own diagnostic RTP quizzes and use them with pupils, because it allows you to review prior learning and check their understanding. So it's a useful tool to support remote learning and can continue to be utilised in the classroom as well, as they do at Avonwood. So the great thing about the RTP quizzes is that they can be self-marking. So a lot of these, you can set it up to know what the right answer is, so that you don't have to go through marking every single test afterwards. They can do the little quizzes and you can see how each child's doing on them. They don't need to sign in a Microsoft account, but bear in mind they will need one if you want to kind of track and see how they're doing on each of the quizzes. So it's web and mobile friendly, so they don't need a software or an app, so they can just click on the link, whether it's on a mobile phone, if you've got iPads in class, laptops, or if they're doing them from home. They don't need any specific software or apps to download. There is inbuilt immersive reader support, which is great for accessibility. There's obviously no paper and no printing and no lost work either, because it's all saved up to the cloud. You can track, as I say, who's responding to quiz tasks, but only if they are signed in that case. And you can export the quiz scores to Excel, so you can do a really good gap analysis as well. And again, that helps you to really group and sort the Excel spreadsheet to see who's struggling on what, but also as a class, what are the weaker areas and what are the stronger areas across the whole class. Therefore, again, just helps you to really think about which units you actually do need to spend the most time on. And they can be used in your assignment workflow in class teams if you're using that as well. So if you want to create your own quizzes, your own quiz on Microsoft Forms, you can go to Microsoft Forms from your Office 365 apps and just click on New Quiz. And then finally, there's some digital platforms here to give you an idea of some different places that you can go for other ways to use kind of different things that align around the RTP strands, but also general maths support through online websites and apps and so on. So Maths Flex, which is aligned to the White Rose Maths and then easily adjusted around the RTP strands. You've got ARC, which has got specific RTP interventions. Doodle Maths, which has got an effective AI learning algorithm, so that it kind of puts the children onto the next thing they need based on how they're doing on certain quizzes. And then you've got things like Hit the Button, Maths Frame, which are just really easy for the children to do and also great to have up on the whiteboard to just test times tables again, just doing a quick test and getting them to run up and hit the button on the whiteboard for the right times tables. And again, that just gives you an idea of who's confident, who's coming up time and time again, who's holding back, who's not sure. And then this is a new one. You've got Teacher Monster number skills, which if you've ever seen Teacher Monsters to Read, which is the phonics program, it's really good gameplay. And then they've just released a number skills one, so their first maths game, but that's all free through the website, or you can pay for the apps if you've got iPads and you want to roll it out that way. But they often do the apps for free on the App Store as well, so look out for that. But it's all free through the website. Children can log in. They can have their own login as well if you want to set it up like that, and then you can see how the children are doing on it as well. So hopefully we now have an understanding of the ready to progress strands to steer curriculum prioritisation, an insight into how diagnostic assessment can underpin effective teaching decisions, and we've looked at the exposition of using digital platforms to drive curriculum prioritisation. And the main goal really is to make sure that we're able to plan the curriculum around fitting it all in, getting that coverage in that we need to, and also getting those individual gaps checked as well to make sure that there's no individual left behind because they've got different gaps to everyone else and so on. So thank you very much for your time watching this session. There is a short quiz afterwards on the sway if you wouldn't mind taking that, just to kind of check your understanding and to show us that give us an idea of how the session has gone and that you've taken away what we'd like you to take away from it. And then if you'd like to get in touch with myself, my email's at the bottom there, Jodie Lopez, and then I've put Joe Jackson Taylor's email on there. Bear in mind, obviously, he's very busy in school himself as well, so if he doesn't reply straight away, I'm sure you'll give him grace. But if you want to email myself or Gemma from United Learning, we'll be able to share with you those quizzes that Joe's very kindly offered to share with us as well. Thank you for listening.